Okay, so this is an example of the Nikon T80, and everybody's will be different, but we will work through it. First things first, anybody that has it on auto, get it off. It needs to go on M. Just line up that M with that white button. Never move it again. Ever again. It's the only way you're going to learn how to get your camera right. And you don't want to take this class if that's not something you want to do. But I'm going to tell you right now that until you do that, your camera will not take the pictures that you want it to take. So also, changing your lens. If you have trouble changing your lens, let me know. But this button helps with that, and you can move your lens around. But I can certainly help you with that with a video too. So the first thing you want to do, and I'm sorry that this is spelled wrong. I saved it and it won't let me change it before I spelled it when I misspelled it. So what you want to do is this dial on your Nikon is going to change your aperture. Here on your screen is where you're going to see your aperture. So when you move this dial, when this is an M, this stays an M. When you move this dial, you're going to see this number change. Again, this is at f5.6. I highly recommend everybody gets a lens, a 50mm or a 35mm f1.4 or f1.8. These kit lenses are not made to give you the best image possible, but we'll certainly work with it if that's what you have. So work with this. Just quickly move this dial, see where your F goes. So take it down to 1.8. It'll go up, you know, so high. I don't know what mine, probably 16 or no, 22. And just so you get an idea of how to move it and how to change it. Your next is your shutter speed. So in order to change your shutter speed, back here on a Nikon, there is this dial, which you can see here. So this front dial changes your aperture. This back dial is going to change your shutter speed, and that's where your shutter speed is, okay? Now your ISO, when we decide we're going to change this, depending on what model you have, you might have to go into menu and actually physically change it, or you can do your ISO and move this dial and while holding this ISO button down and change your ISO setting. So altogether, again, you have your front button that's changing your aperture, this back dial is changing your shutter speed, and your ISO is going to change on the back of your camera. And now here comes the first test that we're going to do. I want everybody to get two objects. I chose a pepper and a orange, and go to a windowsill. Now these results may vary depending on how much sun you're getting in. I would highly suggest not using a windowsill where the sun is just coming directly in at it, but maybe just a windowsill that's at least bright enough. Today was a cloudy day, and the sun is somewhere over my house. It would be somewhere over my house, so it wouldn't be at the angle where it would be coming in anyways. And the first thing that we're going to do is look at the changing of your aperture and what that's going to do. So let's set our cameras. Go back to your camera. And up top here, we're going to set our ISO at 100. Okay, this is 125, but that's okay. Set it at 100. Your shutter speed at 100. And then set your ISO to 200. Once you have that done, we're going to get ready to take a picture. So using your windowsill, set up your pepper here and put your orange in the background, or whatever two things you have. Put whatever is behind it a couple inches back and enough that you can see it coming out of the side here. And the first thing we're going to do, again, your shutter speed's at 100, 1/100. Your ISO's at 200. Take your aperture and you're going to put it to f1.8 and take your picture. Now, what you're going to observe initially is you should observe something like this. You have, this is nice and in focus, your orange is not in focus, and nothing in the background is in focus. But it's probably still a little too bright. Because, again, think about what we're doing. Your shutter speed's at 100, so it's fast, not super fast, but letting a decent amount of light in. Your aperture is at 1.8, meaning your lens is super wide open. What is that doing? It's giving you a nice blurry background, but at the same time, it's letting in a lot of light. So this is being blown out a little bit. Move your shutter speed to 2.2. Your aperture to 2.2. Move your aperture to 2.2 and see what happens. Your light is becoming less because the opening is getting smaller and your depth of field is getting a little worse. So you're not getting that. It's still blurry, but it's not nearly as blurry as that. Next, move your aperture to 4.5. Now all of a sudden you're really beginning to see that orange come into play. That depth of field is going away, and it's certainly not as bright as here. Now let's move it to f6. Okay? Now you can really, you can see the little divots, everything. You can start to see everything. You can see my, something on my wall. I apologize for my windows. We're getting them replaced in about 4 days. So, and then go to f9. And then lastly, f11. So now you're at f11. Everything's dark because there's not a lot of light put in. You can see every detail. You can see literally the detail in the wood here. Now you're saying to me, okay, well, what if I wanted everything to be detailed? What do I do? What do you think you would do? Your shutter speed's at f100. You would want more light in, which would mean opening up those shutters for longer. So take your shutter speed to like 1/13. And now all of a sudden, you're at f11, your shutter speed's 1/13, and you get your light back in. Everything's in focus, where before, none of this, you couldn't see anything. But now you're getting your light in. Do that 3 more times. Go through that. Keep your shutter speed at 100, your ISO at 200, and change your aperture. And keep looking. Just keep looking at your camera and understanding what your aperture is doing to your depth of field and how much light, okay? Then I want you to pause, and we're going to go forward and do the shutter speed one. So at this one, what I want you to do is set your aperture to 2.2, your ISO at 200, and the first one I want you to do, I want you to take your shutter speed and do 1/4. So what you're going to see here is 1/4. Number one, you're going to realize how slow that actually is, and that if there was a moving kid in front of you, you wouldn't get that. And secondly, it's blowing out this entire picture. Then let's move it to 1/13. Certainly getting better. Try 1/60. Getting better. I think, where am I at this one? I think maybe 1/125 might have been. No, 40, 60. This is 60, and then do 125, 320 for this one, 1,000, 1,600, and 3,200. So what you noticed is you go from here, let's say that's 40. You're letting in a lot of light. Your aperture is 2.2, so the background's blurry, but it's still not that perfect yet. 125 or 60. And then as you get to this is 320, and then you're at 1,000. It's just getting too dark. But what you're noticing is that we're keeping our aperture at 2.2. So this is blurry. And this is still too dark. But maybe that's probably more of the perfect picture. Maybe in between those two, you get your blurry background, and you're also not blowing out this image. So this is where you can understand the usefulness of the shutter speed. You want that blurry background, okay? How do you achieve it? How do you get that to happen? By keeping it at f2.2 is by adjusting your shutter speed. So what you probably found out here is if you keep your aperture at 2.2, your shutter speed probably 125